Okay, yeah. Give me a second. No, I'm gonna try to do this here. Hi.
Okay, let's start.
Okay.
So I have as my guest today, Andres Villarroel of Venezuela Insider, and he's going to be talking to us today about the country of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and what motivated him to start the Venezuela Insider consultancy.
Okay.
Yeah, I just turned off the YouTube because there was an echo there. So, how are you doing today, Andres?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So, regarding Venezuela Insider, how do you see the developments this week in the news? I mean, I know you've mentioned on your X and Twitter feed the Washington made the decision not to enhance the sanctions against Venezuela or to leave them as is. So, how do you evaluate those?
Well, first is you have to see it from both ends. First, the political circus that you always have with this kind of thing, and also the macroeconomic aspect. And regarding the political message, is that the sanctions were, well, first, let's start a little bit how the sanctions started. The sanctions against individual members of the Venezuelan government started on 2015. Several of them are sanctioned, unhabilitated to do business in the United States and travel to the United States, unless it's for a diplomatic reason. Very good. Also, their assets have been frozen over there. Okay. However, the sanctions against the Venezuelan industries and mostly were against the government and as a whole, and regarding the oil industry and other major industries like mining, financing, and that kind of stuff. That was during the Trump administration. And from what you can see is those sanctions are looking for, I mean, with the angle of the at the moment administration that was with Donald Trump, they were trying to push some sort of regime change or at least make Venezuela more democratic, as you want to call it. But that didn't work. And of course, if you see in history, sanctions don't work in order to pressure a regime change, regardless of the place. You saw that you're seeing right now with Russia, with Putin. Russia is the most sanctioned nation. Same thing in Iran. Same thing at the moment in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was in power, and doesn't work like that. Now, then in 2022, when already you had Biden, the Democrats on the White House, you saw that they wanted, they're a little bit more flexible compared to the Trump administration. They tried putting this license, the license 44, in order to allow companies to further invest in the country, like Chevron, the big oil multinational. This particular company, of course, being a U.S. multinational, received a special license in order. Chevron already had a significant presence within the Venezuelan oil industry, and thanks to that particular concession on 2022, they furthered their investments, the oil investments here in the country, of course. and also that give a leeway for other companies, multinationals, in order to uh, either start investing in the Venezuelan oil industry with, of course, with certain limitations, or just further their investments. Now, right now, what we have, that was part of a political deal between both the Venezuelan government, the political opposition, and the US government. They signed a couple of deals. Apparently, well, they're accusing, each side is accusing the other of not fulfilling their, not keeping their end of the bargain. And what happened is, right now, is that now where is where it comes the political message. The US is quote unquote punishing the Venezuelan government for not fulfilling their end of the bargain. And because of course, of the politics and the election and that kind of thing, we have elections both on the US and Venezuela this year. And the Venezuelan government is saying, of course, they're going to start blaming that the sanctions are not going to let further economic development here in the country. But when you read the actual document of the sanctions, what it says is that the license, the special license used by that was issued by the Treasury Department, the OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets of the U.S. Treasury Department, basically allow until a certain range operations and investment, oil investment in the Venezuelan industry, but with limitations regarding the Venezuelan government. So basically, I'm just trying to give a Reader's Digest, is that you basically can do the business and the investing and sell the oil, that kind of stuff, but with a lot of limitations regarding the revenue that the Venezuelan government was going to get on the first place. But still, it's good for the Venezuelan economy because you have to invest in. These people have to, of course, invest in supplies and human capital, that kind of stuff. Now, this particular license, that's what it says. What actually happened on this week is that this license by the Treasury Department was replaced by the license 44A. And it's pretty much the same thing. So the multinationals that have presence in Venezuela can keep operating in the company, operating in the country, and also other companies can join and get license of their own. And meanwhile, really what happened is that these companies can still operate, especially a company like Chevron, that is a US company, also another companies in Europe like Repsol, and they can still further operating. And the main issue is regarding Venezuela. And the only issue right now with the new regime of sanctions, the new scheme of sanctions, is that the companies abroad cannot make big deals with the Venezuelan government when the Venezuelan government has 50% of the stake on such investments, and also Russian companies in Venezuela, these companies that are getting the license, cannot do business with Russian institutions, companies, entities within Venezuela.
Grace, I wanted to thank you for that very thorough answer because while I was muted myself, I had forgot to start the Rumble live stream as well. So now we are also streaming to Rumble as well as X, and Twitch. And I believe we're also streaming to Vimeo, the ExitStrategy.World Vimeo channel. So we are streaming now to 5 Cinco channels, and I'm very happy about that. And thank you for the very thorough question. I know you had done a YouTube video on this topic of sanctions 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and hardly anything had really changed with the OFAC list. I'm sure that they'll probably end up trying to slap the Russian companies around for doing business with the Russian companies back in their motherland from Venezuela. But it's really a pleasure to have you on the show to have somebody who is so knowledgeable about what's really going on in Venezuela, because the American people we get overwhelming negativity when it comes to Venezuela. And I felt like it was necessary for our audience to get a more fair and balanced picture, as they say, to hear some of the, let's say, green shoots of economic recovery that are starting to happen in Venezuela, despite the fact that what a lot of people, frankly, American people see on the street with some of the Venezuelans who have come as part of the migrant influx, although there may be even an overall small percentage of the huge number of people that the Biden administration has allowed to come into this country through the wide open border, it still like adds to the negative impression that people get from Fox News and other channels, and even the so-called liberal media channels. So I thought it was very important to get a more balanced view. And one of the other things we're going to talk about, besides the sanctions relief, which I wanted to lead off with because you've already done a video on that topic, is the question of BRICS and BRICS Plus membership for Venezuela that President Nicolas Maduro recently announced is a done deal, finally, after he'd been talking about it for over a year. And now, this week, we also saw the headline news that President Lula of Brazil has affirmed in a joint statement of the Brazilian and Colombian foreign ministries with President Gustavo Petro that Colombia, which is Venezuela's second, I believe, most important trading partner in South America after Brazil, is also going to join BRICS Plus. So could you talk about the impact of potentially Venezuela and Colombia being admitted to BRICS Plus together at this October's BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia? Thank you.
Okay. Well, first, I love to talk about BRICS, so let's talk BRICS. And yes, well, I'm gonna start answering if it's a joint admission to BRICS, both for Colombia and Venezuela. Well, it might happen. We saw last year's BRICS summit that they were admitted, mostly Middle Eastern nations. They're the new BRICS members, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, both at the same time. So that was kind of interesting, and also Egypt. Now, the new members of the BRICS group might be South American, could be both Colombia and Venezuela. Hoping is that the case. Now, I wouldn't say it's a done deal at the moment. I have to wait to what happens in Kazan later in the year, and I don't see it. It could go either way. But what I can say on the behalf of the Venezuelan government, they have done every diplomatic move in order to be approved. They have great relationship with most of the BRIC nations, both the founding members and also the new members. They have, of course, good friends. They're in good grace with Brazil, also with Russia, with India, not as much, but it's not a bad, it's kind of a neutral, tilting good relationship. It's not, but it's not excellent. It's not bad yet. China, a little bit with a bit, Chinese authorities, Xi Jinping government is a little bit cautious with Venezuela, but still have great relationship. And South Africa, I don't see how South Africa can hinder that the approval now with Colombia in board. So it could be a package deal, both Venezuela and Colombia. That will be very interesting. And now, if I put the shoes of the BRICS nations, especially the big ones like Russia and China, and of course, India as well. But first, we have to analyze who are the BRICS nations on the first place. And these people, let's be honest, they are not concerned about democracy or human rights or that kind of stuff, but they are concerned about execution and actually being effective on their own agendas. Putting aside the politics, all of these economies, these emerging economies, have been providing excellent results. Russia, even with the sanctions and the special military operation in Ukraine, they have provided positive GDP growth. China, of course, we know what they have been able to pull off. India is also growing rapidly as well. South Africa, well, kind of there, but probably the best sub-Saharan African economy. And also you have Brazil, that of course is the largest GDP in the whole Latin America. What Venezuela can provide for BRICS, of course, the largest oil reserves in the world. That's the elephant in the room. Oil against everything that we have been fed. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay. I didn't mean to. I was trying to put you in solo layout, but it didn't work. But that's okay. Just please continue with your very thorough answers. And I do appreciate these, because my first conversation, for those in the audience, with my initial guest on the initial podcast, webcast we had for ExitStrategy.World was more of a, let's say, freewheeling, informal back and forth. This is a more journalistic style interview. And I really do appreciate, like I said, the erudition of your responses and how you break it down for the audience in very clear language. Regarding the BRICS Plus, that's kind of been, I think, for the U.S., there, for let's say the hard right, there's so-called hard right, but in reality, just kind of the neocon interventionist fake right. They have kind of demonized Venezuela as part of this, axis of evil or whatever, that it's aligned with Iran, or it's like a way for Russia and China to sort of get their project power into the Western Hemisphere, in a way that is somehow threatening to Monroe Doctrine idea of the U.S. that no hostile power would ever intervene in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, what would you say, Andres? And I don't want to leave this question for last, but this is sort of a worst case scenario question. If let's say the second Cold War we're now in, and it's obvious we're in one, between the United States and China, but with Russia closely allied with China, and now the U.S. is accusing China. If before they pretended like maybe China was abiding by the sanctions threats or not seriously arming or helping Russia's war machine, now they're saying the opposite, that in fact China is sending, if not assembled equipment, then certainly parts, computer chips, electrical wiring, circuit boards, all these things, components for the Russian arms industry that is, surging. I mean, into 3 shifts around the clock, massive production of weaponry to sustain their operations in Ukraine. What do you think Venezuelans would think about the possibility of, let's say, a Caribbean crisis or Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0, where Venezuela is somehow, becomes a base for, some sort of Russian hypersonic missiles or some kind of major Russian deployment to the Western Hemisphere of troops or weaponry that the United States could see as threatening in the worst case scenario? Because we already have had, for example, this week, or even on the part of the Chinese, which is extremely unlikely. But this week, we had the United States developing an exercise in the Philippines with the first deployment of the intermediate range missiles, because the U.S. tore up the treaty, the INF treaty. I believe it was that was done during the Trump years. But Biden has moved forward apparently with at least a symbolic deployment of missiles to the Philippines to test the Chinese response. Could we see either Chinese or Russian, in some extreme case scenario, missiles deployed to Venezuela pointed at the United States in response if the U.S., provocatively deploys those weapons into Japan or into, say Poland, some country where the flight time of a hypersonic weapon to Moscow or Beijing, vice versa, is minimal?
Okay. Well, first, what I have to say is, well, I'm not a military expert. I can talk about, the macroeconomics and geopolitics. Regarding military, I mean, Venezuela is not a war country. We haven't had a war here in Venezuela since centuries now.
Since your independence from Spain, I believe that you haven't really had any wars with your neighbors. I mean, there've been, let's say, guerrilla warfare with the FARC and, problems with the border, Colombia maybe, but there's really been no like nation state warfare, major wars for Venezuela since its independence, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, the thing is also, I know the world is on a turmoil right now. A bunch of war zones, a lot of conflicts. Right now, I just recently heard about something about Bosnia and Serbia coming back again on the Balkans.
Right.
We have the of course the issue in Ukraine, the issue in Israel and Gaza, and now with Iran,
Yeah.
and now with the Houthis in Yemen, and a couple of or the Sahel in Africa. So we have a bunch of military conflicts, and
Yeah.
when the
Sudan. There's a civil war in
yeah,
Sudan with Russia
Sudan
and
and
Ukraine, and lots
Mali
of foreign
and
powers are
France and
involved in
also
it.
the
Yeah.
former French colonies. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So a bunch of hot zones, and many people are worried that Venezuela is going to become one of them. Well, you can rest assured that it's not going to happen. Venezuela is not a war country, regardless of who is in charge.
Yeah.
Believe me, Venezuelans don't have this bellic mentality. You know, my dad used to say all the time that Venezuelans are not revolutionary because, I mean, they can bitch and moan and protest and yell whatever they want. But, you know, at 6 o'clock, they have to go to the liquor store and get a beer. So, and that's why we are not good revolutionaries.
Yeah.
And
Maduro doesn't strike me as a young Fidel Castro
no,
advised
no, no,
like Che
not at all.
Guevara, who obviously met his sticky end in Bolivia. We all know what happened to Che Guevara. So I think I totally agree with you. I just wanted to kind of get that scenario out of the way, midway through the show, so we could get down to the discussion of business and life for people, for expats potentially looking at Venezuela as a country that, they could sort of get in on early because, I see Venezuela, and I think I mentioned this in the show notes I emailed to you last night, that it reminds me of where Colombia was at, in maybe the mid 2000s, where people were still scared. A lot of expats were still scared to go there because of the FARC situation. And they were still like negotiating an end to the long civil war there. And obviously the role of the drug trade complicated those negotiations because the FARC, everybody was profiting from it in one way or the other, both the government aligned factions and the guerrillas. And it also, you could also compare it to, and I lived in Moscow from 2009 to 2010. You could compare it to like where Russia was at in the late 90s, very late 90s or early 2000s, where people still thought, it's very scary to go there. If you make a major investment, the government's going to expropriate your investment, or if you buy real estate, somehow you'll get squeezed out of it. You'll lose your investment. But I see Venezuela in a very similar light. I mean, you're talking about real estate prices in Venezuela, even in some of the very nice resort areas on the Caribbean coast that are comparable to what you would see in, let's say, a much poorer per capita income country, like, say, Egypt. I mean, I was just doing a post about some of the real estate price ranges in the New Cairo area of Egypt. And some of the, let's say, smaller apartments would start from about, 8,500 to 12,000 US dollars by the time you factor in the closing costs and paying the attorney. And, for let's say a townhome, it might be something like $20,000 to $30,000. And even in these resort areas of Venezuela, there are people talking on X about how they could snap up a nice, like beach house close to walking distance to the beach for, $40,000 US dollars. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, that's why I had to, from an American perspective, when, our real estate is going nuts, and in Europe and the UK, they have similar problems with unaffordable housing, especially in Canada, as you've heard. Talk about the real estate opportunity right now in Venezuela, because this seems to be one of the biggest opportunities for foreign investors.
Okay, well, first I want to address the geopolitics about Venezuela in order to give you a fair assessment.
Sure.
And well, Venezuela is risky. I'm not going to say it isn't, but it's way less risky than most people think, and that's an opportunity by itself.
Right.
And the other thing that you have to understand is that the economy, actually, I'm very bullish on the Venezuelan economy after an 80% GDP collapse. But the funny thing about Venezuela is that with all of the problems, all of the issues, Venezuela is an awesome country. The main issue, of course, there are a lot of frictions, what in Twitter they call the Latin hammer, and I have to be, responsible, also addressing both the good and bad things. And the other thing is regarding politics. I mean, don't worry that much about politics. Remember, these guys are just politicians are just like CEOs. They just make business decisions for their interest, not for our interest. And just you have to deal it like that.
Right.
And on the next 5 to 10 years, and this is how I see it, this is why I'm bullish in Venezuela, is because it's not on the politicians, the ones that do have power here, it's not on their interest to hinder the Venezuelan. They need a good development of the Venezuelan economy, both on the inside, because sustaining a government is it's like having a business, so you have to fit the payroll and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to fit the bill on that regard. And the second thing is that you need to show competence to your international partners, that in this case could be just in a few months the BRICS nations, also
Right.
regional allies like Colombia and Brazil. So you need, what do you need? And Venezuela is a great country, and I'm going to explain just briefly why, but it's such a hell of a country. I mean, because it's not just about the oil, it's everything. I mean, it's how everything is integrated. You have great human capital. You have a very decent infrastructure for for Latin American standards, of course. You have
You have fertile soil and a climate where you can grow things year round.
exactly,
I mean, wonderful.
exactly,
You can have a
exactly.
garden with bananas and coconuts in the back, and it's year round tropical climate because you're on the Caribbean.
No, no,
But
but
yeah,
you have
there's
every
enough
climate.
mountains. There's
You
enough
have every
mountains.
climate. Yeah, but you have every climate in the world.
Yeah.
Of course, most is Caribbean tropical climate, but we have. I mean, we have every kind of climate, every kind of weather, every kind of flora and fauna. I mean, naturally, if you're an eco guy, you're gonna love Venezuela. But also, it's how everything works together. That's the true value of Venezuela, not just the oil or not just the beaches or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's how everything works. So Venezuela being close to the bottom is still. I mean, of course, it's hard to be to make ends meet in Venezuela, but after that, it's still awesome being Venezuela. Meanwhile, many countries that supposedly are thriving, they reach their glass ceiling very quickly. For instance, like Chile. That
Mhm.
I mean, I don't hate Chile, but it doesn't have the same thing. You have to. It's something intangible that you have to do the assessment by yourself. Boots on the ground. And I've done it in Chile and Argentina and places in Europe.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Venezuela is far. It's very far from that ceiling. And this is something that we might see in the next 10 years, 20 years, 5 years. I see a bullish trend on the next 5 to 10 years. But afterwards, I mean, we're way far from that ceiling that I see most countries already they're hitting, especially the OECD nations. Okay.
I agree with that too. I mean, you look at what's happening this week in Dubai, and in fairness and full disclosure, we offer we have a back office in Dubai where we can offer the residency services in the UAE and business formation, bank account formation, all those services. Dubai is an amazing place to do business, and Andrew Tate said it best. It's one of the this might be the greatest city in the world, or at least the greatest new city in the world. It's not. It doesn't have any old world charm. It's completely new in terms of how it's been constructed in the last 35 years. But that being said, there is a limit to how far you can go in, let's say, a desert climate. It's still in a desert. And as they found out with the cloud seeding, there's a lot of controversy about that. It ties into the whole debate between so-called conspiracy theorists and mainline scientists about the geoengineering, how far it's gone, what they're spraying in the atmosphere, who knows, but I don't want to get off into that tangent, but I do want to mention you brought up a very important point, which is both about the geographic carrying capacity. That is, Chile is restricted. It is a fact, sad fact for Chileans. They are restricted by their geography. They lost a war with, I want to say, with Argentina and with Paraguay. Well, to a lesser extent, I think it was Paraguay lost a big war, but they lost the war to Argentina. The Chileans did. So they have one of the world's longest and narrowest countries, but that kind of restricted geography means that there are some certain limits, on how the country can develop. it's all going to be, in that narrow strip between the coast and the mountains, predominantly is where the population is going to be. So you have a sort of built-in, let's say, limitation in terms of how far your real estate market can develop. It's either going to go north or south. It can't really go east-west. And you have, let's say, the limitations from the perspective of the shipping. For example, one of the points the Paraguay bros bring up, on X, I don't know if you've seen a lot of promotion of Paraguay lately.
Yes,
Because it's a territorial taxation country for gringos, even though there is unfortunately still no direct flight from Miami to Asuncion like there is to, I don't know if there is to Caracas, but there's definitely to Bogota, where you can make an easy connection to Caracas from Bogota or Medellin, whichever.
There are other options, but you can sort it out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is geography is still a factor. It can't be just waved away, no matter how sophisticated we say we are in the 21st century. And, you can work from anywhere. Geography matters and climate matters. Like it's hard to be outside in Dubai when it's 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, like that's a factor for people.
Yeah, the glass ceiling of Dubai is you have to play God in order to further keep growing.
Or it's reached a point where you have to have money to get there to make money. Like you can't go there with like the lower end on the resources. You cannot be lower middle class in Dubai anymore, right?
No, I will argue that any place,
LA or Toronto or Hong Kong, it doesn't work.
Yes. I agree with that. Actually, it's a book, a very famous book called Prisoners of Geography, and explain basically how the big superpowers are the way they are just because of geography. And like Russia, US, China, kind of stuff. And I would say Venezuela on a lesser degree. It's kind of the same. So there is a lot of value. The main point is there is a lot of value, but you have to take it with a grain of salt, because right now, what I'm doing is just on the process of informing, educating, because we are a long way to go. And from what I'm seeing right now in the West, they have very terrible information about Venezuela.
Correct.
Both historically and now current data, the information that most Westerners have is what happened on 2017. That was awful. Was awful. But I mean, even I was, I'm done with Venezuela back then. But I cooled it off like a year afterwards, and I saw the potential. And what I'm seeing right now is that, of course, it's tricky. It's not gonna be easy. A lot of bureaucracy. I would say one of the worst things, especially if you are from abroad, about Venezuela is the bureaucracy. It's horrendous. Yeah. In Latin America, it's bad, but here in Venezuela, it's horrendous. So beware of that. However, if you can visit the country and just take a trip, do so. You're going to be safe and do some boots on the ground and reach your own conclusion. And that's what I will suggest to anybody.
Right. And that's why I used the Colombia in mid-2005, let's say 2007 range analogy, or the analogy of coming to Moscow or St. Petersburg in 1999. Because it's like you're buying at almost the floor, right? You're not buying at the top. You're buying almost the floor in terms of dollar value or euro value designation of the properties. That it's not going to get any cheaper than it is now, for all practical purposes. Especially if the dollar itself and euro begin to lose value, as we're all aware is going to happen, is a mathematical certainty, is happening already. It's just happening in double digits instead of like triple digits yet. But we have already double-digit inflation here in the United States, where the government says maybe inflation is 7-8%, and reality, of course, for anybody who goes to the grocery store, is it's more like 20 to 25% annual inflation markups in things like, even things that people don't think about. For example, like storage units. I have a storage unit and it's constantly going up. Like every quarter, they raise the price of the storage unit by another $25 a month, whatever. Just to give you a simple example of things that are constantly going up. So one of the reasons that you see this trend of more people getting into the internationalization and offshoring space, into the consultancy space, is precisely because they realize that there's going to be a big wave of gringo retirees, or people who just want to work remotely from their North American jobs or businesses from Latin America, because unlike Asia, you don't have the huge time zone difference. You can have the Zooms with the clients at normal hours and so forth. But also, the Latin American culture and picking up Spanish is much easier than learning a Southeast Asian language. It's much easier than learning Russian or Chinese or any of those languages. And also, finally, let's be frank, and we'll get to this before the end of the show. The Latinas, the Venezuelan women are very beautiful, particularly for the single middle-aged guys, the divorced guys, who've got some means, they've got some stature, they've got some status, as you put it in one of your videos about dating in Venezuela. Status is very important.
Yes.
Don't come here don't come to Caracas as a brokey, for sure.
Yes.
And do take care of yourself, of your appearance. You make sure you're groomed, you work out. Don't come to Caracas if you're a fat slob and you don't have money, for sure. But if you're a guy who takes care of himself, is in good shape, and you've got obvious signs that you've got things going on as a man, as a business owner, you're going to have good prospects in Caracas, right? As a man.
In every city you can do it.
Yeah. In pretty much all of Latin America, but especially Caracas this day. There's going to be some really gorgeous women who would like to meet you, who would be interested in talking to you. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But I did want to circle back to this topic of geography and glass ceilings of development, because this is something, and it sounds to me like you are a classically trained economist in development economics, which is a very popular topic in Latin America and has been for decades. Why certain countries in Latin America, let's say, hit the ceiling and then declined. Most infamously, probably would be the example of Argentina, right, where it was one of the richest economies on the planet or certainly one of the fastest growing in the early 20th century, along with the United States, along with the then Russian Empire. Right, this was Tsarist Russia before the revolution. Russia was like I like to tell people Russia was the Hercules in the cradle that was strangled in the cradle because it was getting too strong. Like even Russia's allies, and this is the hidden cause of World War I. The British especially were frightened of where the Russians were going. Not only the Germans, but who had a border with them, but at that time, but also the British Empire. So, but this topic of geography and glass ceilings, it's really fascinating to me because, like I was mentioning earlier, the Paraguay bros, they're bullish on Paraguay because despite the fact that it's landlocked, Asuncion is roughly 1,000 miles from both the Atlantic ports and the Pacific ports, on the Peru side and southern Peru, I think, and the Uruguay side. And obviously they have the big rivers too for all the shipping, which is very convenient for them. And abundant fresh water, abundant food, and even abundant hydropower for the Bitcoin bros, to mine Bitcoin. And by the way, I did want to ask you, that brings up another topic. What is the legal status of Bitcoin in Venezuela? Are you allowed to own it? Are you allowed to trade it? Or can you, most importantly, is Bitcoin mining allowed, legal in Venezuela?
Okay, well, the relationship between the government and Bitcoin has been, hot and cold. The Venezuelan government issued their own currency a few years ago, the Petro, but it has been phased out the past year. And now there was a corruption.
You mean this was a CBDC? The Petro was a...
No, it was not a CBDC. It was a bona fide crypto.
Okay.
And now it started, with a lot of issues with the sanctions. They cannot trade on the famous exchanges like Binance and that kind of stuff. So it was the third tier exchanges is where Petro work, and also you with a card that you have here. Anyway, but one faction of the Venezuelan government was very bullish on crypto, and we still have actually an agency regarding crypto, and actually that was one way that they move around the sanctions using crypto in order to receive the payment for oil shipments for a few years, of course, at a discount. Well, but what happened is this faction of the government got taken down, and most of them were the crypto bros of the Venezuelan government. So right now,
So some of those Venezuelan crypto bros are now in Miami, let's say. They're not in Venezuela anymore.
No, we have a bunch of crypto bros here. Trust me. Okay, now right now the position of the Venezuelan government regarding crypto is they are agnostic. That's it. They are not trying to regulate it or anything like that. Crypto mining for a couple of years was a big deal here. Some people actually make quite decent money because the electricity was dirt cheap, and you can plug a bunch of of these mining units. However, since we have a bunch of energy issues, the electricity issues,
the
Venezuelan government start cracking down on the miners because you can tell easily on the electricity bill, when you have a very particular energy use that is associated on a random home that is associated with mining.
Right. You can't really hide a Bitcoin mining, any significant mining operation. You can kind of do it a little bit on the down low, but once you add enough miners, you can't hide it.
Exactly. Well, what happened was a crackdown. You have to register with this particular agency, the SUNACRIP, the crypto government agency. But since the past year and a half, something like that, they are not issuing the license in order to allow you to do crypto mining here. So, I mean, crypto mining here in Venezuela is basically dead at the moment, or is at least in intensive care unit right now. But for the rest, you can use crypto. I mean, not a big deal. The government doesn't ban crypto or doesn't want the capital gains of owning a crypto or anything like that. So you can do your crypto things here very freely. Right now, the only thing that you cannot do is the mining.
So it's not exactly like, say, El Salvador in terms of the government has fully embraced it, but it's also not banned or suppressed in any way either. So
I heard even Milei wants to regulate it in Argentina, and the Venezuelan government never said anything about regulating Bitcoin.
Right. It's just not really a concern. It hasn't reached, say, a critical mass in terms of adoption that the government really gives a crap one way.
There's a lot of adoption here. There's a lot of adoption, but
there is an adoption. Certainly in Caracas. Are there places in Caracas where you can pay with a Lightning wallet, like a Bitcoin wallet, like you can in El Salvador? Like you go and you can pay for coffee with on the Lightning network.
Depends on the place. Depends on the place, but yeah, you every now and then, you can pay with your Binance account, something of that nature. Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah, because that brings me to sort of my next question, which is about the type of entrepreneur who's going to be attracted to Venezuela, the type of person who's going to be looking for your services. Every entrepreneur has what they call a client or a customer avatar, right? You've heard this term before, I'm sure, of who is the person who's going to be seeking out Andres Villarroel's services, right? As coming to Venezuela for the first time, or the second time, or they need some guidance in terms of, to save time, referrals to obviously, maybe some legal help for the residency. How easy is it for an American citizen? Let's start with that, and we can talk about the Canadians and the LATAM bros saying, "Hey, flee Canada! It's time to get the hell out of Trudeau's Canada," right? At a moment, but how easy is it for a gringo American citizen to get Venezuelan residency, temporary to permanent? How does it work, Andres? The basics.
Well, let's talk about Venezuelan migration law 101.
Sure.
And let's start by the tourism, who can enter, who cannot. The rule of thumb is that the 100 richest nations on GDP per capita terms, they can enter visa free, and the second tier one, they cannot. On the first 100, a couple of these nations, we have a visa reciprocity policy that goes for Chileans, Peruvians, and people from Panama, since they require a tourist visa in order for Venezuelans to visit those countries. The Venezuelan government also requires a tourist visa for them.
So just to be clear, Venezuela is not a part of Mercosur, but it does.
It is. No, it is.
It is. Okay. I wanted to make
sure.
It
is, but it's on a limbo because it is, for instance, I was able to get a residency in Argentina because I'm using the Mercosur treatment, that if you go to Argentina, you want to be a Mercosur citizen. And I was treated in Argentina like a Mercosur citizen. So
Right.
the legality, actually, I'm very pleased with the Argentinian authorities. And also with Brazil, also depends on the situation at the moment. Well, now going with the US and Canadians, since, the very tight diplomatic relationship, the feud with the local governments over there, in here the Venezuelan government, you do require a tourist visa. In case of Canadians, it's even worse because at least Americans, they don't have an embassy, a Venezuelan embassy within the state, so they have to go to Mexico City or other places. And the Canadians are on a catch-22. It's more complicated for Canadians, actually.
Why is it more complicated for Canadians? Could you repeat that?
Because they are on a hold regarding the bureaucracy, because indeed we have a Venezuelan embassy in Ottawa, but it's not operating as you liked, and most likely you will have to go to another country, but you need a legal presence in another country, so it's very tricky. Dealing with Canadians, with Americans is way easier, actually. It's easier than most people think.
Sorry, I muted myself. They were vacuuming in the hallway here of my building, so I didn't want you to hear the background noise. So it's pretty easy for Americans, would you say, to get residency? So the
No,
temporary
it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's easier than most people think.
Okay, easier than most people think. So would you recommend, if an American wants to get their temporary residency, hiring if let's say they're living in Caracas, just a simplified example, they're renting an apartment there, would a landlord ask for proof of temporary residency to sign a lease, let's say longer than 90 days? That wouldn't just be like a vacation rental for cash or for cash dollars, or would it be do they ask for that, or do you think that that's less common maybe? Or do the gringos typically just make like those border runs to Colombia or something, and then they just re-enter on a tourist visa? How does that work?
Depends on the case. Depends on the case. Well, regarding renting and leasing, the most important is the proof of income and that kind of stuff. So it can be arranged with the owner of the property in that particular regard. And afterwards, staying long term. First, you need a tourist visa in order to enter Venezuela as a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
Unless you have a second passport, that kind of stuff. Even a residency might help, depending on which residency.
You mean in a second country, like if an American had a residency in,
yes,
let's say El Salvador.
Well, El Salvador is not going to help as much.
Not in Mercosur, but let's say they had Colombian residency. Okay, the Mercosur country that has a border with Venezuela. Okay.
Okay. Well, depending on your particular interest in Venezuela, but there are legal ways in order actually you can stay legally. You have to stay legally. Please do so, and you can stay months, years, of course, but you need a reason a legal reason that you can show, and depending on the particular mechanism, in order to actually come to Venezuela and stay long term and get a residency.
Yeah, and just so you're aware, Andres, we're coming up on the 4 o'clock hour there in Caracas. Do you have 15 more minutes of overdrive?
Sure, go ahead.
4:15 p.m. Caracas time. Okay, that's when we'll cut off, because especially for those viewing on Rumble, either live or on the playback of Rumble, I started this video about 3 to 4 minutes in, so I just want to make sure we get the full length of the video. Yeah, these are all very, very relevant questions. Obviously, I'm not asking for a play-by-play or to break it down into minute detail, but just the generality, so the audience has the expectation set before they contact you, before they reach out in DMs, or however the best way to contact you is. I'm sure you get a lot of people reaching out to you via X or Twitter DMs, but also through your website, which I wanted to repeat for the audience. I should have said it at the outset, is VenezuelaInsider.com. Is that correct? And you're also on
Yes.
Patreon at Venezuela Insider, where you have a subscription newsletter that comes out how many times? 3-4 times a month? Or
No,
6?
it's two times a week.
Okay, twice a week. So 8 times a month. Okay, that's very good. Yeah, we also have our Patreon where we have a lot of, as people can see, free content linked up. But also we have our subscription content, which includes, by the way, for exclusively for the $8 a month subscribers, the transcriptions of these programs we do. So where some people, they don't like to watch, they just prefer to scroll through and read. We have the AI heavily edited by myself transcripts of these conversations over there, and of course all the guests receive that transcript as well, so emailed to them. So that being said, Andres, we've got about 15 minutes left. What would be, let's say, the most important thing for people to understand before they come to Venezuela to get temporary or permanent residency? What is the most important thing for the average American, let's say age 35 to 55, who's coming to Venezuela to as a digital nomad? They've got some kind of business, online business. They've got proof of income, source of income. What is the most important thing for them to understand before they come to Venezuela and seeking temporary or permanent residence?
Well, the first thing is logistics and budget. Something in Venezuela, I explain this on my content a lot of times, is that doing price discovery is very difficult in Venezuela. It's not, it's not as intuitive like in the United States. Well, before the inflation. Well, the point is that if you take care of both of these things, your experience can be further, more enjoyable. Because many people try to cut corners on one thing and then have to overspend in other things. Especially if you're a digital nomad, you need great internet connection. That can be tricky. And the other thing, of course, having your paperwork and logistics and your budget. And it's going to cost you cents on the dollar if you do things right. Because if you don't, you're going to have to pay a premium in order to fix an issue that you didn't have. If you didn't have everything sorted, not everything, but the most important things sorted out at the first place. And that's why, for instance, when you get a consulting with me, I try to do the play-by-play of everything you're gonna need, depending, of course, where is your particular occupation and what is your purpose in the country. But most of the time, many people don't actually, they don't think it's a good expense, to hire me as a consultant. And at the end, they always end up overpaying.
Exactly. What type of just as an aside, what are the type of clients you're seeing right now? I mean, who are the type of people that are asking for your services? Is there any particular industry that stands out? Is it like, I don't know, lawyers or maybe certain types of consultants who are coming to Venezuela? Like, what are you seeing in terms of maybe even, I don't know, probably not, I'm guessing not petroleum engineers, too many of those, because of the way PDVSA works, as I understand it.
No, but we have multinationals, and actually we have a bunch of expats that work on the multinationals, but they are not typical my usual clients, because usually the company itself does, well, not as good as I do it, but they do it for themselves, and they don't, basically they have their babysitters, so they're good to go.
But I mean, in terms of, like, say, an independent real estate investor who's looking at Venezuela from, as I mentioned to earlier, that it's never going to be a better time to buy than now in terms of acquiring, let's say, beachfront property or Caracas prime real estate, then it's only going to go up from here. Though, let's say a real estate investor comes to Venezuela.
Yeah, I had a handful of them.
Yeah, and they want to buy properties for dollars, for cash. You have realtors you work with and real estate or lawyers who know the real estate law in Venezuela who can advise those type of people, the investors.
Yes, well, but the issue is that bureaucracy is dreadful. It's something that they have to understand depending on their nationality, on what they're trying to accomplish here in the country. So bureaucracy is going to be dreadful. The other thing is not cheap. Venezuela is not cheap. Other thing that you have to know if you're from abroad, Venezuela, if you're trying to look for a bargain, Venezuela is not going to be it. I mean, it's not like Dubai or Switzerland, anything like that, or Singapore, but it's not going to be dirt cheap.
Yeah, certainly not in the prime neighborhoods of Caracas, where
No,
people are quite
no, but
affluent.
even also of course, depends on the structure of your particular basket of goods and services. For instance, energy is cheaper, and a couple of things are cheaper, but consumer spending is going to be more expensive than most people think. The other thing about
Because of the cost of imports, like in Argentina, for example, where the food was cheaper before the devaluation, but now that all the wages are going up since Milei has implemented these shock therapy, suddenly you see on X that people are saying that Buenos Aires was one of the, let's say, the cheapest capitals in the world. I mean, in terms of beautiful capitals, I'm not talking about places that are in civil war or something like that, but I'm just saying in terms of developed countries, Argentina was one of the cheapest places, but now overnight, seemingly, it's become one of the more expensive places to be if you aspire to what we would call an upper middle class to semi-affluent American lifestyle, right? Where you have a lot of imported goods, then Argentina is quite expensive right now. And it would be similar in Caracas is what you're saying. Like if you want a certain standard of living that you had, say, in Manhattan or in LA, and you come to Caracas, right, and you want that similar lifestyle, it's going to cost you.
Yes. Now, there are nice areas outside of Caracas that it's going to cost you cents on the dollar. Caracas, the east side of Caracas, the nicest areas of Caracas is going to be the most expensive places to live here in the country. But no, if you want something near the beach, there are options, cents on the dollar compared to Caracas. Now, something I want to talk about the real estate is that we have indeed cheap properties, but they're not as cheap. And the nice properties on the nice areas that you want to invest, because I mean, if you're investing in real estate, you want to invest in the best areas possible. They're not going to be cheap. I mean, there are properties 50,000, 100,000, $500,000, 2 million. Actually, there's a property. It's like 10 million. There's a $10 million property here. It's in Caracas, But it's of course something spectacular. No, it's like
it's like a hacienda. It's like a full spread.
Yeah, very well located.
Views like if you were buying a home in the Hollywood Hills, it would be the same thing.
Yeah, something of that nature. So what I will suggest, if you're truly investing, get a nice property in a nice area, depending if it's commercial or residential. And if you're speculating, well, that's another thing. And always do it, I mean, with money that you are not counting to lose. But the other thing is that if you get a decent area, let's say you cannot liquidate on the next few years your investing, your position, but at least you can cash flow such property. That's the good thing about getting a good location.
Yeah, exactly. You can get good cash flow. You can command decent rents, or that almost cover or more than cover the basic upkeep and mortgage, whatever. Now, I do have to ask this: is like as in the rest of Latin America, is it pretty much straight up a cash property market, or is there any kind of mortgage structure, at least for commercial properties, that you can demonstrate certain, at least from the prior ownership, had cash flow, had tenants, businesses operating there? Like, say, if you wanted to buy, I don't know, Caracas Strip Mall, for example, where there are a number of businesses, there's some restaurants, whatever. You have tenants, you have traffic. Maybe there's a gym, something like that. What would that look? That would probably be a bit more complicated, I would imagine, than just buying a residential property, a condo, or a townhouse for cash, right? But how does that look, you think, in Caracas? Do you know people who deal in CRE, who deal in those type of properties in Caracas?
Well, first, I have to say the mortgage market in Venezuela is pretty much not existent. And if you are international, you're not going to have access to those. And there are some financing that is very short, like 6 months or a couple of years, and with a high interest rate. So I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, it's obviously going to be very high interest just to deal with the inflation factor in.
No, but it's not for inflation. It's because it's not liquid. There is not liquidity regarding the credit market. The credit market overall for the whole economy is 2% of GDP.
Yeah.
So don't count on getting financing. That's one thing. The other thing is that depending commercial or residential, that's up to you. But the very good, what I consider a good commercial real estate, is going to be expensive. In the east side of Caracas, it's very, very expensive. Talking thousands of dollars per square meter.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Any real estate, commercial real estate that's in a high traffic affluent area is going to be very expensive, as it would be in any developed country. So, okay, well, let's get to, let's say, the fun topic. Well, what I did have one more question I wanted to get to, which is regarding payments. How people get paid? Is it still Venezuela, like Argentina, like most of Latin America, still appears to be primarily a cash economy? You have a significant, very high percentage of the population that is unbanked, right? I don't know. I've seen the statistics, even in Mexico, which has a border with the United States. Obviously, American banks have been active there for decades. My understanding is something like 45 to 50% of the population, almost half the population, is unbanked. Would it be similar in Venezuela, even more so because of the economic crisis that was so severe as recently as you said in 2017, where you personally thought about emigrating out of the country for better opportunities?
Well, first regarding banking, actually the average Venezuelan is way ahead of the curve compared to the average Latin American citizen. The percentage of people that own bank accounts and that kind of stuff actually is very high for Latin American standards.
Because you have a state-sponsored bank, basically, like sort of like in Russia, they have Sberbank, which is, I think, state-owned, and a couple other state-owned banks. Is that issue everybody a card if they want one, basically? Is that
not exactly? Not exactly. The Venezuelan government have a few banks, and yes, they are juggernauts. The big one is Banco de Venezuela, and yes, basically something like that. But we have a bunch of private banks. I mean, that's not an issue here. And the other issue is that regarding payments, I mean, if you come from abroad, don't sweat it. Bring your check card, debit card, Visa, Mastercard, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but most of the time, I believe they're going to work. Trying to
you can get dollars out of the ATMs, in other words, right?
No, you cannot do that.
Well, you can only get bolivars, but I'm saying
no, not even bolivars is a little bit tricky. Yeah, you can get it, but it's a little bit tricky.
Okay,
And
explain that part, please.
no, but don't worry. Every time you go to a restaurant
I mean, you can pay with MasterCard and Visa. I mean, in restaurants and nice places, but I'm just saying,
yes,
like,
and also
when you get out in the countryside, you want to have cash, like small denomination dollars are accepted. Like if you go to a fruit stand, like in El Salvador, they take small bills, right? Maybe
yes,
5,
yes,
10.
they can do it. No, of course.
Well.
Even for bigger things, they also can take. No, Venezuelans are very flexible on that regard, regarding the payment methods, trying to bring cash, especially low denomination bills, bring a handful of, check cards and credit cards. Some cases you're going to be able to pay crypto. If you're an American, and this is going to be a lifesaver and it's going to make your life easy here, if you have Zelle, Zelle, the banking application.
Right.
If you're an American, if you have a US bank account, and try to activate Zelle because it's very used here in the country.
Oh, you're talking about activating your SIM card. I mean,
the Zelle is a banking application for US banking.
Oh, Zelle. I'm sorry, Zell. Yeah. It works in Venezuela too. You can send Zelle payments.
Excellent work.
That's great to hear. That's really convenient for Americans, obviously.
It's going to make
Wells Fargo or with any of the major banks. Pretty much all the major banks use Zelle in the United States. So you can send two people in Venezuela for, say, to pay your, I don't know, your housekeeper, your maid, whoever. You can pay. If they have a Venezuelan bank account, they can receive Zelle payments.
No, and the other thing is, for instance, the housekeeper is not going to have Zelle, most likely, but
most likely cash, yes.
But a lot of people who do have Zelle, they're going to help you in order to do the exchange and give you the money and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's going to be very handy if you come from abroad. Now, if you come from Europe and you bring a bunch of euros and a couple of cards, you should be fine. But with Cell is it's very, very convenient.
I see. That's very good and convenient to hear for banking and payments, because that's one of the things that people hear. Do you think with Venezuela, and this is one of the next to last question I'll ask, do you think that Venezuela is, if it does indeed enter the BRICS Plus with Colombia, that you could see more maybe Yandex Pay or WePay, some of these Russian or Chinese platforms, maybe even Yandex Taxi, I don't know, could make its debut in Venezuela? Because obviously we've been mainly talking about the gringo market and people from the United States or Canada coming to Venezuela, needing your services. But we do have to say that if there's already visa-free, I believe, travel between Venezuela and Russia, if I'm not mistaken, and probably China will be next, if that's not already in place, that you could see more Russian and Chinese businessmen coming to Venezuela, and
they already are here.
Yeah, they're already here. I mean, in greater numbers, even particularly in getting more active in the real estate market. Russians buying properties, for example, seeing a lot of Venezuelan real estate is at least slightly off the beaten path of Caracas and the most luxurious beach resorts as bargains that they could snatch up. What would you do? You think that we will start to see some of those Russian or Chinese platforms? I don't know. WeChat's probably not very popular in Latin America at all, I would imagine, but possibly WePay or Yandex Pay would be.
I don't know, because depends on the adoption of the Venezuelans, and Venezuelans love the USD, and I don't see at this moment how they can trust a platform like Yandex or WeChat using both,
or even Alipay for AliExpress.
Exactly. Using the renminbi or the ruble. I don't see that happening. I see a lot of Chinese, both Chinese and Russian adoption here, but not on the currency that's holy that's sacred for the average Venezuelan.
Yeah, I mean, Venezuelans are going to keep their savings in dollars until the dollar basically,
and hard currency.
Yeah, or euros if they have to switch from dollars to euros. If the dollar keeps going down, maybe they will most likely, probably, given the liquidity and probably that the Spanish banks like Santander have some presence in Caracas, I'd imagine.
They prefer, actually, the adoption here is way more for the dollar rather than the euro. So
yeah,
I don't see, unless something, I'm talking hyperinflation in the United States, something of that scenario. If that doesn't happen, I see the Venezuelans still using the dollars, regardless.
Yeah, and let me ask you just one more question, and then we'll get to the final question. Regarding the upcoming elections in the United States, I mean, it seems like as we opened the program with this note that despite the sanctions that were implemented in 2015, that was during the Obama years, even before Trump took office, that there's basically been a kind of quiet U.S. detente, Venezuela detente going on between Caracas and Washington, regardless of administration, because number one, because the U.S. needs the heavy sour crude, because the Canadian production is going down, and the alternative is importing oil from Russia, or by way of India from the middlemen in India who are refining the Russian crude oil for the European market. But it seems like there's this detente that's going on, and things are getting a little bit better between Washington and Caracas, and you expect that trend to continue regardless of who wins the election, whether it's Biden or Trump. It seems likely, given that Trump's a more pragmatic businessman. And in general, I see, let's say, the green shoots in the Republican Party in particular, a greater, not even only sensitivity, obviously desire to woo the Latino vote, because that's the only way the GOP can remain a national party and not become a regional party, but also more broadly, maybe the open admiration for President Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, and seeing him as a real champion of freedom in the hemisphere, and now with Javier Milei in Argentina. Do you think that this idea of a Latin American renaissance of maybe Republicans becoming more just overall friendly with Latin America and more knowledgeable about it could benefit Venezuela in the future, that we could see maybe even, probably not a President Trump coming to Caracas, obviously, but that we could see a continuation of this thaw, even if Trump gets in, right? That the relationship could continue to improve, and you could see, more Trump supporting type businessmen going down to Caracas, obviously some of them single, in the near future, that this trend will continue.
Okay, well, with the Trump administration, it's going to be on the political side of the speech. What we see on the news is going to be more harsh, of course. It's going to be a back and forth the first few months, and the sanctions are going to be kept in place. However, Trump on the Trump administration, hypothetical Trump administration in the future will most likely on the background do some deals, cut some licenses to Chevron, maybe other U.S. multinationals, maybe some European multinationals. And that's pretty much what I see with Trump in Latin America. And I'm talking in Venezuela. Now, regarding this, right, let's say libertarian movement around, I mean, I wouldn't call it libertarian because I don't know how much libertarian Bukele is. And Milei is not acting as libertarian as I thought.
It's more the traditional shock therapy, but he's just taking it to the next level in terms of the speed with which he's doing it, right?
Yes, but I mean, a few things that I don't like about Milei. So I don't. I mean, of course, better than the Peronistas. No, I have to say that. But I don't trust that much Milei, especially for the people that surround, because he calls La Casta, the big guys, the elites of Argentina. But he's also playing ball with them. And the economy minister is this particular man that was already the economy minister during Macri's administration, Caputo. Now, of course, Milei is de facto the economy minister of Argentina, and Caputo is just, the placeholder. But still, there are a few things about harmonies with Argentina. I don't see how much it's going to work. Of course, people like Milei and Bukele, what they, more than being libertarian or right-wing, they are results-driven, because here's the issue about the right-wing conservatives in Latin America. I'm talking the politicians here. That they are populists as well, and they act to the same degree. They don't do squat, and the only thing is they are more friends with the United States than the left-leaning governments. But afterwards, they still high taxes, corruption, bureaucracy, and that kind of stuff. So the right-wing, quote-unquote, politicians, before Milei and Bukele, they have been proven unsuccessful. People like Piñera in Chile, or Macri in Argentina, or Duque in Colombia. I mean, guys that are just, or Peña Nieto in Mexico. These guys, I mean, they are pretty much a nothing burger. And now you have these people like Bukele and Milei that they...
Right. There's been this pattern in Latin America, not to interrupt, but of just kind of swinging back and forth from the right to the left, and sort of not establishing, let's say, an equilibrium, because the right shock therapy fails and then the left comes in and promises.
No, but sometimes they don't even try it. They don't even try the shock therapy. They are just populists that they say they are right-wing conservatives and usually have better relationship with the United States, and that's it. But in practice, still high taxes. I mean, the same economic model that the left. So,
right, they don't do enough to clear out the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy just kind of outlasts them, which is very similar to, has some loose similarities as the United States politics, I would argue, becomes more Latin American style, because we have higher inequality here, we have more inflation, we have more, let's say, you don't want to call them no-go zones, but we have more, let's say, bad areas that are not areas of the part of the country you necessarily want to be in, not the safest places, and so forth. You get more Latin American style populism and more Latin American style politics. And the best way, I think, to understand Trump, the crazy left calls him Trump Hitler and all this nonsense, because he's basically a typical Latin American politician. It is the best way, I think, to interpret Trump, in that, it's very much populist. It's very much what was the first thing Trump did when he came in? He rolled out the big Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, whatever, which had some good points, but it also had a lot of, not so good points. Overall, it was kind of a wash. But the main point I wanted to similarity to Trump and many of these Latin American populist right-wing leaders is that so-called right-wing is that number one, they have extremely good close relations with Israel, which Milei does have by Latin American standards, exceptionally close. And also that the bureaucracy tries to outlast them, the so-called deep state, if you will, kind of just overwhelms it. And Trump, it seemed like his administration, even from day one, was literally under siege from the so-called deep state. They got rid of, his top national security advisor, General Flynn. They created a scandal over his conversation with a Russian ambassador that was totally, recorded by FBI, CIA, whoever, NSA. Everybody was listening who needed to listen to it. And they tried to create a scandal out of it, like it was some kind of treasonous act to have a conversation as an incoming, national security advisor with a Russian ambassador. Completely nonsensical scandal. And yet, Milei is similarly, he's moving so fast in Argentina, I think partially, number one, because he's anticipating a lot of backlash from the bureaucrats and from all the, let's say, entrenched groups, but also there is that American factor in the background in terms of not only is he getting closer to Southcom, to the Pentagon, Command for South America, like he just invited the lady general who's the commander of the Southern Command, U.S. Southern Command, to Argentina, and he's talking about kicking the Chinese out of this so-called base they have, which isn't really. It's hard to say if it's really a military base or is it some sort of so-called scientific research station where they've got antennas or something, nefarious is supposedly going on there. But also the gas, the energy angle of Argentina is very important, right? That's coming on because you have this enormous shale gas resource in the Vaca de Muerte, but you don't have any pipelines to get it out. It's kind of stuck, if you will, right? And you also have on the green energy side, Milei is meeting with Elon Musk, and he's, trying to maybe there's talk of setting up a Tesla factory for South America, right? Because the mother lode of lithium, the giant lithium resource is right there in Bolivia across the border. So just your final thoughts, I guess, where does Venezuela fit into this sort of, let's say, rightward libertarian trend in Latin America? And is maybe like I said, some kind of positive, let's say, changes from Washington's perspective possible in Venezuela?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say that recently the Venezuelan government signed a bill on the Congress that is an anti-fascist law. So basically, you are being banned of talking about libertarian and right-wing politics.
It's not a good idea to come to Venezuela preaching that. In other words, you might get
exactly.
As a gringo, even as a gringo, you might just be shown to the airport and sent on your way.
Well, if you're lucky. No. I mean, it's not to get scared. It's just some scare tactic against the opposition leaders, that kind of stuff. It's
right.
not. I mean, it's not for the average citizen, but still, be a little bit careful. I'm going to mention something, and this is going to be very practical for Venezuela. 4 things that are going to get you in trouble in Venezuela: the paperwork. Have your paperwork.
No. Yeah.
Please, no drugs. It's going to get you in trouble anywhere, any place in the world.
Well,
Venezuela,
be drug free. Yeah.
Yes, because Venezuela is not like Europe or some places in Latin America or some places in North America where you see high consumption of drugs. Venezuelans are kind of conservative on that regarding drugs. And so
it makes sense. You have a border with Colombia, right? Peru and Colombia are the 2 top cocaine growers in the world. Yeah.
Yes, but they are not consumers. And that's the issue.
Exactly. They don't consume their own product. They don't get high on their own supply.
Okay, but the main issue is because something that can get you in trouble, trying to avoid, and if you are a consumer, I don't judge you, but something that can get you in trouble, by the way. So will discourage you to do it here in the country. Also, politics, something you can talk about your local politician or if you're Canadian, you can talk crap about Trudeau or something,
Yeah.
something like that.
Nobody cares if you hate your own government.
Yeah, nobody will care. It's just trying to active talk crap against Venezuela.
Proselytize libertarianism in Venezuela.
Yes,
Not a
and
good idea under this government.
now something I have to say is the Venezuelan government has become more pragmatic on the past 6 years since 2018, loosely. I mean, on politics, they are far left, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
But in economics, they have been acting more center left.
Maybe they read that famous phrase by the little helmsman Deng Xiaoping, right? That's the funny thing about China, right? It's still the largest communist party in the world, but yet, the idol is not so much Mao as Deng, who said it doesn't matter what color the cat is, if it's black or white, as long as it catches the mice. And
Exactly.
I quoted that to some Chinese I was talking to once, some Chinese think tankers, and they said yes, that's the quote. And maybe Venezuela is starting to, and this is, by the way, a contradiction of the libertarians, because they're all about anti-state and all this stuff, but yet they realize that the Chinese get shit done, they get shit built. This is something that it creates a certain, how do I put it, cognitive dissonance in the libertarian mind when they look at China. Yes. And then they look at the state of American cities where we have supposedly all this freedom. And then Tucker Carlson, as you may be aware, went to Moscow, and he showed the beautiful Moscow Metro, which was built obviously by the Soviet Union, although it's been expanded since Russian independence. And Jon Stewart could only reply, well, all the filth and homeless people and schizophrenics running around and people occasionally knifing each other, attacking each other on the New York subway. This is the plus all the, the rats and the water overflowing and everything. That's the price we pay for freedom. That's the price of freedom, is the disorder and the filth. And so what you're having right now in the whole libertarian right, I would say, is this sort of clash between order and freedom, the desire for freedom and the desire for order, right? And I think what you're seeing in Venezuela, probably with the joining the BRICS Plus, is, are the Chinese going to come in and start really, building out infrastructure? I mean, I saw a video the other day from Nigeria, Lagos, right? Not a rich country per capita, right? But certainly one with enormous, like Venezuela, enormous oil resources and very capable entrepreneurial people, right? And it was a beautiful, brand new Chinese-built tram, clean, on time. Nobody was, there weren't any vendors, blocking the tracks like you see in some African countries where they're like literally right next to the railroad tracks. So it was, do you think we're going to see that in Venezuela? We're going to see the Chinese come in and start building out the infrastructure, and that's going to in turn attract the more gringo investor, because they're going to say, wow, the BRICS are getting shit done. And here in the US, in terms of infrastructure, we're stagnant. We're going to spend $100 billion to build one high-speed rail line, maybe by 2040 in California, right?
Well, first, Venezuela is not foreign to Chinese investing, and that happened since almost 20 years ago that they started. They were lackluster results, and mostly some corruption and mismanagement.
And that happened in Nicaragua too. Like some Chinese company got the concession to build the Nicaragua.
No, but we have a bunch. We have a bunch of
happened.
joint ventures. Yeah, but we have a bunch of joint ventures here between Chinese and Venezuela. Right. Since the past 6-7 years, Chinese authorities have been a little bit discouraged in order to invest in Venezuela, but they are kind of building a bond yet again since last year. And now the good thing about the BRICS is something that I would like. One of the reasons why I would like to see Venezuela joining the BRICS is because these superpowers from the east side, let's say, of the sphere, on the sphere, and you're going to see, because they don't care about politics, they care about results. Russia, China, Brazil, and they will like, okay, regarding politics, do whatever you want, but we need results, we need effectiveness. And that's what they are trying. I mean, it's hard for the Venezuelan government to do so. They are kind of getting there, but but I think we're going to see good results on that particular regard on the next 5-10 years.
Well, that's a great answer, Andres, and I appreciate you bearing with me because I didn't mean to go off on tangents like I did in the very first Exit Strategy webcast. Because your answers have been very, I would say, thorough, but also concise in this last question. So I wanted to ask you the final question, which I saved for last, is what do you think is in the water that makes the Venezuelan women so beautiful? Out of all the women in Latin America, why do they stand out? Why have you had 7 Venezuelan Miss Universe winners?
Well, 3 things. The first thing, we have a true melting pot. Unlike the US, that, I mean, New York, you see New York City, and you say that's a melting pot. But however, in the United States, I mean, I'm not saying the United States, everyone lives by themselves, but usually, you know, the WASP, the white Caucasian guys for one hand, and the Latinos for the other hand, and the Asians for other place. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan society always, this is historically, has been more integrated. They have mingled a lot and combined good genetics, and that's why they have good genetics. That's one thing. And the second thing is how people blend with one another. And the third thing, and probably the most important thing, is that Venezuelan little girls, they grow up, you know, watching the beauty pageants like it's the Super Bowl. And since they're very young, they go to fashion and modeling and makeup and that kind of stuff. The things that you need to know in order to become
so they cultivate a culture of beauty. And this was long before Instagram and TikTok kind of made some Western women kind of obsessed with it, you know, all the self-care routines and everything. And they take good care of themselves physically and in terms of their skincare routine and everything.
Yeah, and the makeup, they're excellent on that. Now, the rest of the world is starting to catch up. But I remember 10, 15 years ago when I used to, you know, travel outside Venezuela, you know, I saw the level drop significantly regarding the makeup on the average women and that kind of stuff. Something that you took for granted here in the country.
Yeah. Well, we are coming up on time. Andres, final points about, well, first of all, let me plug the website one more time. It's www.venezuelainsider.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Domain. And that's where they can contact you on your contact form. And also the Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe to Andres' Patreon if you're serious about visiting Venezuela in the near future or investing there, especially if you want to invest there. Follow Andres' Patreon, subscribe, sign up. I think it's $8 a month or 10.
No, it's
15.
The newsletter is just $5 per month.
Okay, $5 a month. Yeah, thank you. $5 a month for the Venezuela Insider newsletter. You get it twice a week in your inbox. So that's really pertinent, really timely information about what's really going on in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and in Venezuelan society and economy. So everything you need to know as a newcomer, as somebody who would be coming there to live, to invest as a digital nomad. And Andres, it's been great to have you on the program. I wanted to thank you again for your time. Thank you for going on overdrive. Like I said, we had the delayed start on the Rumble side of this YouTube stream, and we've been streaming to 5 platforms: YouTube, Twitch, which is a gaming platform, believe it or not, X, and the Rumble and the Vimeo account. For the first time today, we're using our Vimeo account for a program. So thank you very much for your time, Andres. We'll hopefully have you back on in a few months and talk about what's changing in your country, because there's so many things that are going on, particularly with the BRICS Plus. I'd like to have you back on maybe this fall when it's confirmed. And I think that will be a very exciting time for your countrymen and for the future of Venezuela. So thank you very much, Andres.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye-bye now.